I mean, what's the deal with airplane food? Am I right? Thank you. You guys have been too kind. Well, that's all for me for tonight, so let me welcome our next guest to the stage, DC1. Fishman Island is better than Marineford.
What? Hold up.
Now, Fishman Island is the 7th saga in One Piece, landing right in between the Summit War saga and the Punk Hazard saga. While the Punk Hazard arc is generally liked by One Piece fans, it's Summit War's Marineford arc that still to this day ranks as the #1 fan favorite arc by One Piece fans. This video isn't about Marineford or why I personally think it's a pretty overrated segment of One Piece by fans, possibly a video I'll do in the future, I don't know, but I bring it up because since Fishman Island is the follow-up to such a beloved arc like Marineford, I feel like Fishman Island isn't talked about enough by fans and is extremely underrated in the journey of the Straw Hats. I'm just gonna jump right into it because there's a lot that happens in this saga and there's a lot I want to talk about. So let's start at the very beginning of Fishman Island. Before we get into the main conflict of the saga, we start off with the rejoice of the Straw Hat crew. See, this is the very first arc in the series post time skip, so there was a lot of anticipation to see what was going to happen after the 2 years the Straw Hats spent doing their respective training. Some training more than others. Right before starting this arc was the only time I ever took a break from reading and watching One Piece since when I started at the very beginning to up until where we are in the series today. I normally only watch one anime and read one manga at a time, and for One Piece I started off reading the manga and then switched over to anime only somewhere in Water 7, so at that point I felt like I already went through a lot in the story of One Piece, so I decided before I started post time skip, it was a good time for me to take a little break from the series and go watch something new. And that's exactly what I did. I took a break from watching One Piece for probably only like 3 weeks tops before I started to really want to see what was gonna happen next in One Piece. And just like that, One Piece with its ever so alluring story drew me right back into it again. So I watched the beginning of Fishman Island super eager to see what's gonna happen post time skip, and Jesus, right off the bat, I was not disappointed. First off, the animation is immediately better going from pre-time skip to post-time skip. Everything looks more modern and fluid while still maintaining that classic One Piece cartoony feel. This alone was enough to get me super amped to watch One Piece again, but then when I saw the new fake imposter Straw Hat crew, I knew I was in for a real treat. After taking on the world government in an insane stake battle like Marineford, Luffy at this point in the story is well known by everyone across the Grand Line and everyone in the New World. So having this notoriety, there's going to come some impersonators, and that's exactly what these scumbags are. I thought it was funny how bad these attempts at disguises as the Straw Hats are. Like, I mean, look at some of these. Who are these even fooling? Apparently at least some people, that is until the real Nami, now with her new boobs, catches them claiming to be the Straw Hats in a bar. She entertains them being the Straw Hats for a little before she abruptly starts to completely shut them down, kicking their asses as they deserve. Luffy also has a go at beating them up, which is also just oh so satisfying. I always interpreted this part as One Piece as a series metaphorically beating up other shonens that came up since its creation and try to copy what it does, showing them that there is only one true One Piece. This whole beginning of having the Straw Hats slowly forming back together as a crew and defeating the fake Straw Hats was badass as fuck, and a great way to kick off One Piece in its post-time skip era. But this would be about the only lighthearted thing we see covered in this saga. The vast majority of Fishman Island's focus was in tackling the issue of racism. Now, I read and watched One Piece completely spoiler-free, so you can believe how surprised I was when I found out that this was the central conflict for this saga. Sure, One Piece wasn't entirely silly and definitely had some real-life serious plot points, but the premise for Fishman Island just felt less funny than other plots, and a lot more sadder. The way that One Piece displays racism isn't the black and white, just one group oppressing the other stick we normally see. One Piece approaches the issue with more nuance. Racism in Fishman Island is shown in a way that neither side is deemed completely in the right or completely in the wrong. There's levels to it, as there are in the real world. We get a further explanation into the history of fishmen as people in One Piece, and many notable characters who fall under these pretenses. Fishmen are looked down upon as lower than by humans in the New World. They are essentially segregated from human society, condemned to only dwell in their quarters and live a below average quality life, often of which is spent enslaved. For generations, this is how the Fishman people lived, and the only way of life they ever thought they could have, that is, until a man, or better yet, a fishman named Fisher Tiger comes along and changes everything. Fisher Tiger lived most of his life as a slave, so obviously being uncontent with his and his people's unfair, miserable treatment by humans, he kickstarts the revolution to stop racism in the New World. His attempts to revolt are actually very successful, and he frees many slaves as well as forming his own pirate crew, the Sun Pirates, which feature many crucial characters in One Piece, like Arlong, Jinbe, and Hachi. But Tiger's attempts at freeing as many slaves possible ends up being what takes his life, when he sets a former human slave named Koala free back to her homeland, only to be swarmed and killed by humans there when leaving. Fisher Tiger was overall a force for good in the New World, and preached equality for his people, but never violence. His death was mourned by all fishmen, and even though he was ultimately stopped by humans, this didn't stop his movement, which is carried on past his death by a not as peaceful fishman named Horty. Horty comes from the same upbringing as Tiger, but unlike Tiger, he is spiteful of humans and violently despises them, wishing to cause as much damage as he and his pirate crew can to all humans in the New World. He never did like humans to begin with, but after Tiger's death and seeing just how cruel humans could be, he turned completely unforgiving towards them. Horty doesn't just want to be equal with humans, no, he wants to rule over them and enslave them, taking revenge over how they historically treated fish people, and that's exactly what him and his crew are fighting to do. And that's when the Straw Hats arrive in Fishman Island, right in the middle of a war between humans and fishmen. The new Fishman pirates are planning to overthrow the government of Sabuti and make the fishmen the supreme race of the island. Not all fishmen are in favor of this though. Notably, Jinbe is totally against being violent towards humans. He knows that while humans have oppressed his people for generations, not all humans are bad, and he only wants equality, not tyranny. But this viewpoint after Tiger's death became very unpopular among fish people, and Jinbe would lose most of his closest friends because of this standpoint. Speaking of Jinbe, with him and Luffy of course being friends, Jinbe has a conversation with the Straw Hats where he warns Luffy to stay out of the Fishman Revolution and to mind his own business to keep him and his crew safe, as well as give Nami some much needed explanation into her past slave owner, Arlong. I hear y'all saying, what? A fishman having a human slave? Crazy, right? But it actually kind of makes sense when you look into Arlong's past. When we meet Arlong in East Blue, he's just painted as an evil brute who enslaves villages for money and power, but in the Fishman Island, we get a much more wider perspective into his character and why he does the things he does. Arlong, like many other fishmen, grew up in slavery and never was able to have fun and enjoy life freely as he saw many human children doing. This would understandably upset Arlong, and he'd grow to deeply despise all humans. So, when he became an adult, now leading his very own powerful pirate crew in the East Blue, he decides to take revenge on the humans and give them the same treatment he had as a youngster. And that's exactly what he did to Nami's village, violently wreaking havoc over her hometown and taking a particular interest in Nami and her navigation skills, so he kept her as his own personal slave. But Arlong's hatred towards humans isn't the only reason that he enslaves them, it's also just the only life he really knows, being a slave or having slaves. If you look at the way Arlong sets up Nami's village, which he rebrands to Arlong Park, It completely resembles the place where he grew up. Only difference now is that the fishmen are the rulers and the humans are the slaves. Slavery is the only thing Arlong really knows how to do, and it's pretty sad to see how the mistreatment of one group ultimately only ends up negatively affecting everyone. Arlong was definitely always a cool character even in East Blue, but this deeper dive into his backstory in Fishman Island made him seem that much more, for lack of a better word, human, and would not be the last time Oda would give us a further explanation into a character we may have forgotten about and wrote off as only being entirely a single way. But back to Jinbe and Luffy. Of course, when told not to do something, that's exactly what Luffy wants to do, so now he's dead set on defeating Hori and his crew, and ending the chaos going on in Fishman Island. Luffy and Jinbe even have a physical fight over this, but Luffy, as we know, is just gonna do whatever he wants, so no matter how much Jinbe advises against it, Luffy takes his pirate crew and leads them into battle against the new Fishman pirates. This whole battle of the new Fishman pirates versus the Straw Hat pirates is extremely underrated in the One Piece fanbase. Like, this battle was fucking insane when looking at the optics of it, but all anybody wants to talk about is, oh, and his lobby, because haha, giraffe, and whoa, crazy leopard thing. But this whole final showdown was insane. I mean, just right off the bat, when the Straw Hats pull up, Luffy takes out half of their army in seconds with his newfound Haki ability. All the training with Rayleigh during the time skip paid off tenfold. Jesus, Luffy seemed unstoppable in this moment. But luckily for Hori, he has a trick up his sleeve. Drugs. Hori takes an obscene amount of what is the One Piece equivalent to steroids and turns into a fucking psychopath. Like, Hori went from looking like this to looking all the way like this, just from popping a few pills. Yeah, I think I need to invest in some of these, but either way, even with half of Hori's army taken out in seconds, his battle versus Straw Hats isn't just gonna be some cakewalk. Actually, this whole battle in particular seems more evenly matched than most of the battles the Straw Hats have, with them winning super easily most of the time. In particular, the fight between cracked out Hori and Luffy is very tense, and it seemed like Luffy was actually going to lose the battle throughout most of it. The Straw Hats all have a hard-fought battle with the Fishman Pirates, but of course, in classic One Piece fashion, they all pull through in the end and totally beat their asses. But yeah, I just thought Fishman Island was a pretty underrated part in the story of One Piece and just doesn't get enough praise by fans as I think it is. So yeah, that's about pretty much it. So yeah, see ya.